Okay. Okay. Welcome to Haftarah Balak. This is such a beautiful parsha, and I was hoping for a very beautiful Haftarah, and it certainly does. Micah is a beautiful sefer in a lot of ways, and we get the best of what Micah has to offer here. So I looked back, and we have not read any Haftarah from Micah, so we'll start with an introduction to Micah and then connect to our parsha. So Micah is one of the 12 books of Treyasar. And it's during the First Temple period. And it is a very typical Treyasar book in the sense that there are the ups and downs, right? There is the berating of Israel for insincere ritual worship, corruption, and oppression, and calling for a more simple and sincere type of worship, a lot of reassurances in our Haftarah. Interestingly, it is located between Yonah and Nahum. Both of these prophecies describe calamity for the city of Nineveh, right? Yonah, we might be familiar with from Rosh Hashanah, from Yom Kippur, where we read it at Mincha, where Nineveh successfully repents. And so Micah is prophesizing at a time where Nineveh is on the rise. And then they will fall eventually. But I thought that was an interesting tidbit, right? You can sort of place Micah right after Yonah. Okay. So that's Micah. It's a pretty short book, as many of the Treyasar are, or all of them are. And the most obvious reference to our parsha is here in Perek Vav Pasuk K, which is towards the end of the Haftarah, where I'm just going to make this a little bigger for my tired eyes here. Where Micah says, Ami zacharna ma ya'atz Balak melech Moab. My people, remember what Balak, the king of Moab, plotted against you. Ume ana oto Bilam ben Beor, and how Balaam, the son of Beor, responded to him. Right, and so this is remembering our parsha, which is the obvious connection. And on the surface, I would say there's not a lot more to it than that, which is it felt sort of empty in some way, right? That like there are three places in the Navi that reference Balak and Balaam. This one was chosen. None of them are terribly deep, but this seems to be on the surface the only connection. However, there are a few interesting points I want to look at and then sort of circle back to why this was the one chosen, Dafka, for our Haftarah this week. So the first thing is that we are referred to as lions in both our Haftarah and our Parsha. The lion being, right, a symbol. It could be like an animal of prey or a symbol of strength. And here, Micah is certainly using it as a symbol of strength, a fierce lion. That the remnant of Jacob shall be among the nations in the midst of many peoples, like a lion among beasts of the wild. Kikfir be'edrei like a fierce lion among flocks of sheep. Asher im avar v'ramas v'taraf ve'en matzil, which tramples wherever it goes and rends with none to deliver. So certainly, Bnei Israel is being portrayed, or what will be left, the she'erit Yaakov, what will be left of Yaakov, will be fierce and able to trample over whatever is in its path. And similarly, Hen Kalavi, right? We are a people like that rises like a lioness. Yakum v'cha'ari, and leaps up like a lion. Nasa lo yishkav, it rests not. Ad yachol teref v'dam chalali mishta. So in both places, this is a fierce image for a people that has had hardship, but is able to sort of overcome like a lion. Now here, I want to skip to the part about Miriam. I wanted to mention Miriam here because even though Miriam was in last week's Parsha, in some ways this could have been the Haftarah for last week. It's interesting how Micah, I would say, elevates Miriam here, right? So here God is saying like this is not great, right? God is saying your behavior is not in line with what it should be. He says, Ami ma asiti lach uma heleticha anebi, right? My people, what wrong have I done to you? What hardship have I caused you? Ki ha'eliticha me'eretz Mitzrayim, right? Similar to last week's Haftarah and the Haftarah before that, right, where Yiftach is reminding the people of being redeemed from Egypt. Here too, Micah is doing that to God, or God is doing that through Micah, that he brought us up from the house of bondage. And he says then, Ve'eshlach lefanecha et Moshe, Aaron, Miriam. And it's not often that Miriam gets lumped into the siblings in this way, which I think is can be hard, because we often say that the three siblings brought three gifts to the Midbar, Miriam's being the well. And in fact, we say that all three of them died by the kiss of God. This is from the Rambam, from the Guide to the Perplexed. That because of this, the sages have indicated with reference to the deaths of Moshe, Aaron, and Miriam that the three of them died by way of a kiss. We say this most because of the two brothers. And Moshe, the servant of Hashem, died there in the lands of Moab by the mouth of God. Al Pi Hashem indicates a kiss. And then last week's parsha, we read about Aaron by the mouth of God and died there. Now, interestingly, I feel like I can say this confidently in this space with two women in the room, there is a troubling Gemara about the reason that it doesn't explicitly say Pi Hashem to Miriam. Seems to be some kind of gendered issue about inappropriateness of referring to women being kissed or kissing. I don't know. It's a little bit sad. But so I think that here, the fact that Micah and the Rambam are both willing to say so openly, Miriam is on par with her siblings, right? She is a Neviah in her own right. She is responsible for the water in the Midbar. She is a leader of the people. And so I thought that was a beautiful reference. Okay, now back to the mountains. The mountains are actually my favorite part of the Parsha, so I was happy that we could talk about them here. In the Parsha, maybe let's start with the Bamidbar references here. In the Parsha, there is a series of mountains that Balak and Balaam climb. So just to remind everyone, because maybe we haven't read the Parsha yet this week, it's still early, only Tuesday. Balak is the king, Balaam is the prophet for hire. And so Balak has hired Balaam, it's unfortunate they have such similar names, to have a bad prophecy against Israel. And Balaam can't do it because although he is a prophet for hire, he seems to have some integrity and he's just not getting that kind of prophecy. And with each time that he sort of holds back and he says, I can't do that, King Balak, Balak takes him higher up a mountain. Vayikach Balak et Bilam Rosh HaPa'or Hanishkaf Al Pnei Hashimon. So first he takes him to the peak of Pa'or, which overlooks the wasteland. And with that, right, several psukim, this looks like it might be backwards, but V'ikacheu state Sofim al Rosh HaPisga, right? He goes to the summit of the Pisgah. And then again, I did, I'm so sorry, I did this all backwards. V'hi b'boker v'yikach Balak et Bilam v'yalahu bamot, right? So first, Balak takes Balaam up to Bamot Baal, and there he could see a portion of the people. And then he goes to Sedei Sofim, where he sees more people on the summit of Pisgah. And then he takes him to the Rosh HaPa'or, the peak of the Pa'or, which overlooks the whole wasteland. And there is a beautiful teaching that I really love about the analogy of getting up off the dance floor. I'm trying to remember the name of the leadership study. It comes from a not a classic Jewish commentary, but it is all of a sudden his name is escaping me, but he wrote these beautiful books on leadership. And in one of them, he talks about how a good leader has to get off the dance floor and rise up onto the balcony. That when you're on the dance floor, it's like loud and noisy and dark, and everyone's really close to you, and it's hard to like see what's going on. It's often dark. But if you can find a way to climb up the stairs and get onto the balcony, then you can see things much more clearly. And so leaders have to have that ability to sort of look out over the people that they're leading to be effective leaders. And so here in our Parsha, we see that Balak and Balaam are trying to do that. They're trying maybe to get up off the dance floor onto the balcony, to really be able to see. And there's a fascinating Gemara that talks about how maybe this is all like a dream of Moshe's, that this is Moshe's like subconscious speaking. They also think that perhaps Eov is Moshe's subconscious. And so in that case, I think, right, Moshe, who is someone who has been really in the weeds with the people on the dance floor, if you will, it's not surprising that in his dream, he keeps climbing higher and higher. He's desperately looking for that perspective and that ability to sort of take a step back and have some distance and be able to think clearly, which I think is beautiful. And all of these mountains are referenced perhaps in our Haftarah in Micah, right? Shimuna et asher Hashem amar kum riv et haharim. Hear what God is saying. Come present my case before the mountains. V'tishma'ana hagivot kolach, and let the hills hear you pleading. Shimu harim et riv Hashem. Hear you mountains, God's case. The etanim mostei eretz, your firm foundations of the earth. Ki riv laHashem imamo v'im Yisrael yitvakach, because God has a case against his people, a suit against Israel. And so it seems as though perhaps that case is this whole situation with Balak and Balaam, and the mountains are referenced as Balaam and Balak climb up them, right? First, from Bamot Baal to Seit Sophim to the Rosh HaPisgah, HaPo'or. So I think it's interesting that there are some of these like sort of more subtle underlying connections between the lion and the mountains to say like, this is really our Haftarah. This is the Haftarah for us. But I think the real kicker, and I'd love to hear what you guys think, is that I think that there is sort of an open question here. Balaam doesn't seem to be such a bad guy, right? He actually seems to be trying to say the real prophecy, whatever that real prophecy is. But at each place that Balak and Balaam go, they build more and more altars. So you can see one of them referenced here, right? Ve'yiven shiva mizbachot ve'al parva ayal b'mizbach. And they offer a bull and a ram on each altar. And so within this like sort of desperate climb higher and higher, trying to best the Jewish people, Balak and Balaam offer many, many sacrifices to God. And I think that that's the open question, is like, here he is giving korbanot, trying to do the right thing. What is going so wrong? And the answer is in the beautiful psukim that Judith put on her husband's headstone, right? Where it says, Bama akdem Hashem, and this is the end of our Haftarah, akaf Elohim arom, ha'akdemenu ba'olot va'agalim b'nei shana. With what shall I approach God, right? Might I make a mistake like Balak or Bilam and think that if I approach God with lots of burnt offerings, right, that will be enough? And it's such like a extraordinary exaggeration, right? Hashem would God be pleased with thousands of rams, right? Like, and that I think that this is sort of a play on all of the sacrifices that Balak and Bilam are giving. Thousands of rams, myriads of streams of oil. And then what do we finish with, right? Higid l'cha adam ma tov uma Hashem doresh mimcha ki im asot mishpat v'avat chesed v'hatzne lalechet im Elohecha. What does God require of you? Only to do justice and to love goodness and to walk modestly with your God, right? And so Micah is saying the mistake was that God didn't want 1,000 sacrifices. God wanted Balak and Bilam to do justice, to love goodness, and to walk modestly with your God, right? And I think that these psukim are so often quoted because of this idea that like they somehow boil down the essence of the Torah. There's this lovely Gemara in Makot that talks about how there are 613 mitzvot, but several people have come and distilled that large number into like overarching principles that are fewer in number than 613, right? So it's like almost like that story about teach me the Torah on one foot, right? Who can reduce the 613 mitzvot in such a way to allow us to understand them in a shorter, more succinct passage? And so Micah is not most succinct. But Ba Micha b'hamamdin the amidan al shalosh, that Micha is able to come and distill the 613 mitzvot into 3, right? And what are the 3? They're from our Haftarah. Asot mishpat, ahavat chesed, v'hatznei lalechet im Hashem Elokecha. And the Gemara elaborates, what does this really mean? Asot mishpat zehadin, avat chesed zeg milut chesedim, right? That there has to be like a balance, just like we ask God to be Ba'al Rachamim and Ba'al Din, right? To have judgment, but also mercy. So too, we need to have some sort of balance. What is that? This is taking out the dead. So like doing preparing a body for burial or bringing the body to the cemetery, or doing a hachnasat kala, welcoming, accompanying a poor bride to her wedding canopy. And what the Gemara says is both of these are performed without fanfare, right? That we say that doing cleaning a body for burial is like one of those things that can never be repaid, right? That person has passed away. And so if you do it, you're truly not doing it for the glory, you're doing it for the mitzvah. And similarly, a poor bride is never going to be able to come out and provide a wedding for you or your children. And so you're truly just doing it for the mitzvah. But what the Gemara goes on to say is that these are things that are in public. And so if you they're kal v'chomer, if you should walk with God, walk humbly with God in public, so too, all the more so you should do so in private. I'm not sure I understand that kal v'chomer, but I think that what is brilliant about this is that the the idea of doing these things publicly and for other people, right, is that how do we walk with God as we provide for other people? It's not actually about the korbanot that like look up to God. It's about looking around to the other people around us. And so I think that Micah is truly trying to answer a question about what was so bad about what Bilam did. And the answer is he offered the wrong type of korbanot. He offered korbanot that only went up to God when he should have been doing this thing that was much more about taking care of other people out in the world, especially people who might not be able to ever repay that favor. And this, I think, is why Micah and not the other two references, and I'm sorry, it's slipped my mind along with the name of the balcony scholar, where those two are in the Navi, but there are only three references to Balak and Bilam, and I think Micah is the source chosen for our Haftarah because it answers that question. It reinforces that the way to do the right thing is not to offer myriads of korbanot, but to act justly with mishpat, to be ahavat chesed, and to walk humbly with Hashem. So it's such a beautiful way to, I think as we get closer and closer to the 3 weeks and thinking about ahavat chinam and sinat chinam, this is just such a beautiful way of paving that path to say what God really wants is for us to act nicely to each other. And that in that way we honor God as well. And it's such a beautiful last words to sort of be on our mind as we enter the week in front of us. As we start the 3 weeks on Tuesday with Shivat Sar B'Tammuz. Oh, so we probably wouldn't have had Haftarah anyway. But I would love to hear if you have any questions or thoughts, ideas. I'm going to stop the share so we can see each other.
Like, what does it mean transgression? Like the son of the firstborn of transgression.
Okay, looking at here, Pish'e Pri Bitni. That is a great question. I wonder if it is a reference to, it's interesting. I was going to say, I wonder if it's a reference to Abraham, but I don't think that that's possible because Yitzchak is actually Abraham's second born. Let's open that part of Micah, if you have a minute, and let's see if there's any commentary that can help us out. It does have like a sort of not Jewish feel to it in some ways, right? That idea of like offering someone for our transgressions. Let's see. 6, 5, 6, 8. Okay, here it is. Let's see. Let's open Sefaria. I don't know if you're familiar with Sefaria, but it is an amazing, amazing tool. Have the whole world at your fingertips here. Okay, so here's our pasuk, and here is our commentary. Let's see what Rashi says nicely in English. Let's see, but here it is. Shall I give a firstborn? That's not terribly helpful, Rashi, right? Because that is pretty much in the text itself. Let's see. Hatam pre-beats me, so that's referring to my firstborn. Hatam kaful ויתברך ברבבות ישרת בעבור שניים אחריו, וככה הוא האיתן בחורים. I'm not sure what it means here. It's interesting to me that it's not a bigger deal to anybody. I wonder what Steinsaltz would tell us. Um, So here it translates it quite literally. Pre-beat me the fruit of my belly in exchange for the sin of my soul. I wonder if that is somehow different, like than your firstborn child. I will have to do some research. I'm not sure that it's so obvious right on the surface here. Let's see. Um, but it is a very good question. The Navi is often speaks in sort of difficult ways. Shall I give my firstborn for my transgression? This is my firstborn son. The fruit of my belly for the sin of my soul. This is my daughter. I don't know. The Midrash definitely seems to think that it was about children. Hmm. I'm not sure. I'm sorry, Diane. It
Okay,
is a
all
really
right.
good question. I'll have to see if I can find an answer another time.
Um, I was struck looking at this by that passage, shall I give the fruit of my body, simply because we have been reading Yiftach last Jephthah
Yeah.
and puzzling over that very question. Where does this come from? This vow that didn't seem to anticipate difficulties with the vow, and of course his daughter walks out the door and becomes the sacrifice in whichever way you interpret that.
Yeah.
But obviously Micah was not necessarily thinking that we would hear this the week before, but it
I was
certainly
going to say
does
it's an
relate.
interesting thing that they do seem related, but they can't really be. Right in last week's Haftarah, what Judith is referring to is that Yiftach says, I'll offer God the first thing that walks out my door. It's a little unclear what he thought was going to walk out his door, but the thing that does is his firstborn daughter. And and Yiftach does offer her in some way, a little bit unclear. It seems like from the Pshat, like certainly he offered her up as a sacrifice. Perhaps it was more like he sent her to have like a consecrated life as like a someone sort of spiritual and separate. But either way, he got rid of her in some way or another. But we happened to read that Haftarah before this one, but actually they're wildly separate, right,
Mhm.
Judith? Because right, Shoftim becomes so much earlier than Treyasar, um, in time, separated in time.
But the stories would have been in the background of this.
That's true. That's true. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not finding anything more here.
More to the point,
Mhm.
in this other class I'm part of, where we're
Yeah.
going through the judges, more and more the failing of the judges becomes trying to be too much like the other people surrounding them. They're
Mhm.
absorbing the culture around them as God is telling them not to. And this would be
Mhm.
one aspect of it that's there, for hundreds of years, according to the tales in the book of Judges. Um,
Mhm.
and hard to avoid when they're surrounded by neighbors who are actually engaging in these practices,
Yes.
appeasing gods instead of trying to change our ways.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that that's something that, like, throughout Navi we grapple with. So certainly it makes sense that it's a recurring theme. Um, and perhaps trying to help make sense of the Parsha in that way as well. I think that's an interesting question in turn. Like, was Micah really talking about the Parsha, or did we arrange them like this so that they would appear to be talking to each other? These are questions about sort of untangling how the Haftarah got selected, which is also not simple. So, well, thank you both for joining us. Next week we'll be off, but the following week we'll be back on the last Tuesday in July. And I look forward to seeing you guys.
All right, thank you.
Sure.
Thank
An
you for
early Shabbat Shalom.
your loyalty here.
My pleasure. Thank you.
It's wonderful to be looking forward to this, even though it's a little difficult at the earlier hour.
I know. I'm looking forward to it going. I'm going to stop the recording. I'm looking forward to it going back